Okay, so we're going to start looking at our first oral exam unit. So I've put them into kind of the units that tend to come up together and be asked together. What I will say is my family, my house are very, very personal topics. And as an examiner, you know, and at the conferences you'll often be told this, unless a student or a candidate brings up home or family, try to keep those topics general. Okay, we can even see it in the SEC published questions of où habitez-vous? It doesn't ask about the house, it asks just where do you live. That could be directed towards house or area. Okay, so for unit 1, what we're going to do is go through the questions. I'm going to show you answers that I have prepared that you might use or you might adapt. And then we'll look at sample answers. So the first one here is moi-même et ma famille. Myself and my family. The goal here is that you can talk about what someone looks like, what they're like as a person, and how people interact with each other, relationships between people. That's really the key focus as an examiner that I'm looking for you to be able to do. Okay, so I've split it into myself and my family. Let's look at these questions here. Again, like that, when I see something I really like, I'll stop and say, this is really nice because X, Y, Z. But first, I'm going to pronounce these questions for you so that you know what to expect when you hear them. So first one, comment vous appelez-vous? Comment vous appelez-vous? What are you called? We have, quelle est la date de votre anniversaire? If you have no interest in astrology, don't bring up your zodiac sign, I'll just throw it in there. Quelle est la date de votre anniversaire? Comment avez-vous fêté votre anniversaire? Comment avez-vous fêté votre anniversaire? Or, alternatively, comment allez-vous fêter votre anniversaire? Comment allez-vous fêter votre anniversaire? You might also hear the future simple there, which is comment fêterez-vous? Comment fêterez-vous votre anniversaire? How are you going to celebrate? Parlez-moi un peu de vous-même. Parlez-moi un peu de vous-même. Or décrivez-moi votre personnalité. Décrivez-moi votre personnalité. Vous êtes comment comme personne? Vous êtes comment comme personne? Or vous êtes quel type de personne? Vous êtes quel type de personne? Quelle langue savez-vous parler? Or combien de langues parlez-vous? You might say that, like if you say to the examiner, oh, I'm originally from X, Y, or Z. I'm living in Ireland, but I'm from wherever. They might say, oh, well, come here, tell me about languages. It is to do with you as a person. And then, quelle est votre caractéristique préférée en vous-même? Quelle est votre caractéristique préférée en vous-même? Okay, there I've just stuck in a little table on les signes zodiaques, si vous en voulez, mais sinon, c'est pas grave. So, again, I've just put in any phrase that you might choose to adapt. Bon, alors, donc, je m'appelle, blah, 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 mon nom de famille est. Here, about kind of talking about a nickname, a pet name. So here I've said I don't really have one. You might say, j'ai un surnom, c'est, I have one, it is X, Y, Z. Talking about what age you are, okay, being able to talk about when your birthday or date of birth is, what year you were born in. My parents or my friends or my parents say that I am. Again, this is one we missed for pronunciation. So when we have a plural verb, we don't pronounce that ENT. I don't want to hear disons because that sounds like the nous conjugation. So it's mes amis or mes parents disent que je suis. So it's like this. Disent que je suis. Again, for these adjectives, just to make sure we can pronounce them, it's fiable, agréable, aimable, amical, bavard ou bavarde, calme, créatif, créative, intelligent ou intelligente, sociable, sympa, studieux ou studieuse, travailleur, travailleuse, sportif, sportive, paresseux, paresseuse, feignant, feignante, affectueux, affectueuse. If none of those apply to you, have a look in the big book, the French written book. Go to the section on adjectives. I put in 4 or 5 pages of different types of adjectives you might choose to use. I agree, I don't agree. That's good, you know, for the oral exam, but also we can use that in an opinion piece, agreeing and not agreeing. Here's your kind of physical description of yourself, what colour your eyes are. In terms of the grammar that's going on, obviously the S we wouldn't pronounce, we pretend it's not there because it's a single consonant on its own at the end of a word. Noisette comes from the word for hazelnut. And when we have an adjective that comes from food, we never make agreement. Okay, orange, c'est pareil. Orange is the same. Je suis grand, grande, petit, petite, de taille moyenne. Tall, short, medium. It's all about physical description here. Is there anything here that might be a bit difficult to pronounce? No. À hauteur des épaules. So when we see that little in the middle, that's la liaison. À hauteur des épaules, frisé, bouclé, ondulé. So frisé is kind of really tight curls, really coily. Bouclé is curly. Ondulé is wavy. Raide, noué. Braided, that's fine. Again, there's just vocab here for different ways. If you're really trying to stretch out this physical description of yourself, I like to wear a plait. I like to wear, and here we have, obviously, French is spoken in so many different countries around the world that we have different ways to say the same thing in English, and in French that we might just choose to use different dialect words or the way things are said differently in different parts of the world. So des nettes collées or des vanilles, it could be cornrows, it could be flat twists or twist outs. Okay, just depending on where you are in the world. But again, the examiner's not going to get too into the dialectal differences, so whatever you have there is fine. Une queue de cheval, which literally means a horse's tail, a ponytail. Parce que mes cheveux m'énervent. And then quand je fais mes études. And then des cheveux longs non attachés parce que j'ai toujours mal à la tête quand je les attache. That's fine. That's all about myself. Again, a lot of this we can adapt from my family, talking about if you're asked to give a description of someone because you're really talking about them. Again, it's in brackets here. This is likely to only be asked in detail if you mention it. Okay, so when we're done with looking through the questions, we'll go and have a look at the sample answer. I'll read this for you. But family, if you want to talk about your family, if that's a topic you are happy to and comfortable with talking about, make sure you prep it and make sure you're the person that brings it up. Oftentimes students will kind of go, they'll be so ready to get into the oral exam that they'll sit down, the examiner will go, tell me about yourself, and it's straight into myself and my hobbies. Take the time. If you're happy to talk about this is lovely. It kills a bit of time. It's nice and easy to talk about because you know the people that are in your family quite well, usually. So it's nice to kind of take that time on that topic. So our questions that are our possible questions here are, décrivez-moi votre famille. Décrivez-moi votre famille. Again, when you have a word that ends in ILLE, and like I said, as we go through this, we are always going to find extra bits of pronunciation. I don't want to hear those L's. I don't want to hear famille. There should be no, like your tongue shouldn't leave your mouth. Famille. It should stop just behind your front teeth. Avez-vous des frères ou des sœurs? Parlez-moi un peu de votre famille. Parlez-moi un peu de votre famille. Combien êtes-vous chez vous? It's not the most natural way to word it, but y a-t-il beaucoup de personnes dans votre famille? Instead of y a-t-il, you might also be asked, est-ce qu'il y a? We know that we've got three ways of forming questions in French. The first is that we invert the verb and the subject. That's what's happening here. So il y a, it's all been put backwards. The il has gone after. And when we have two vowels coming together, we put that T for pronunciation. Then the second, the next way of forming a question, slightly less formal, is we use est-ce que ou qu'est-ce que, est-ce que il y a. We just stick it in front of the sentence. And the third way is that you leave it as a sentence and put a question mark at the end. You going shop? You are going to the shop. You going to the shop? Up at the end, you're going to the shop. And that then becomes a question. Tu vas au magasin? Okay. We're not going to see that much because it's not very formal. And this is a formal exam with a formal register. So the first two we will hear, the third one not really. Que font vos parents dans la vie? Unless you talk about your parents going to work, this will not be asked to you. 9 times out of 10. I cannot guarantee it won't, but 9 times out of 10. Pensez-vous que c'est important d'avoir une bonne relation avec votre famille? Pensez-vous que c'est important d'avoir une bonne relation avec votre famille? Do you think it's important to have a good relationship with your family? Est-ce que votre famille vous a soutenu pendant cette année? Est-ce que votre famille vous a soutenu pendant cette année? And this comes from the verb. Look at this, it looks like venir, so soutenir. What we have here is liaison. Est-ce que votre famille vous a beaucoup aidé pendant cette année? Est-ce que votre famille vous a beaucoup aidé pendant cette année? Avez-vous beaucoup de proches, relatives? Avez-vous une bonne relation avec vos proches? Y a-t-il des règles dans votre famille? Y a-t-il des règles chez vous? Are there rules in your family? Are there rules in your house? That again, instead of y a-t-il, you might hear est-ce qu'il y a? Est-ce qu'il y a des règles dans votre famille? Quelles sont les règles chez vous? Quelles sont les règles chez vous? And then finally, y a-t-il une bonne ambiance chez vous? Y a-t-il une bonne ambiance chez vous? Or est-ce qu'il y a? Again here, it's just talking about the people in your house, in your family. Nous sommes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, n'importe quoi, whatever. There are 2, 3, 4 people in my family. J'habite avec. If we're talking about a feminine family member, we say ma. If we're talking about a masculine family member, we say mon. If we're talking about a plural family member, we say me. This is talking about how we get on with them. Je m'entends either super bien, bien, assez bien, ou mal. And then with whoever it is we're talking about. J'ai une bonne, très bonne, mauvaise, affreuse relation avec qui que ce soit, whoever that may be. You might say, c'est la guerre entre whoever et moi. There's a war between whoever and me. Okay, here I just have loads of vocab for people who might be in your family. La mère, obviously we don't say mother that often in English, so maman might fit better. Le père, again, we're not that frequently going to say father, so we might say papa. Sœur, frère, aîné. Just remember, or make sure that this is pronounced like aîné. Aîné. Cadet, cadette. So this one is pronounced like cadet. And this one is pronounced like cadette. Cousine, cousin, tante, oncle, grand-mère, mémé, mamie. Sometimes you might see this one spelled like this, and this one spelled like this. Papi with an IE or a Y. Makes no odds. It's the same as in English. Sometimes we put an IE or a Y at the end of a name. Okay? Belle-mère, beau-père, demi-sœur, demi-frère, belle-fille, beau-fils. That's fine. We have a bit there kind of giving more detail. Yeah, it's true that we fight sometimes, but at the end of the day, blah, blah, blah. Things you might fight, because you might say, okay, de quoi vous disputez-vous? What do you fight about? There's some bits there. There's more here even. They steal, se piquer, or piquer quelque chose de quelqu'un, to kind of nick à quelqu'un. What they are as a job. And again, if you want to talk about it, fine. If you don't, also fine. In English, or we throw it in the middle there. In English, we'd say my mom or dad works as a. So my mom is an accountant. My dad is a plumber. Whereas in French, we say ma mère est comptable, comme travail. We drop the a. We don't say un, une. We drop it. We get rid of it. Again, if you want to look at jobs, go and have a look at Unit 6 on work in the notes or the video, because I have a huge amount of vocab there. Again, it's just talking about the importance of the hobbies. This is just, the importance of the hobbies, the importance of the relationship with families, giving more detail about relatives, like whatever is relevant for you, take it from this and put together your answer. That's all great. That's super. So we know the questions, we know where to find content. So let's have a look at our sample answer for this. So I'm going to close this and open it back up because it brings me back up to the checklist. So let's look, sample script. So this is, I've done it actually separately here. Moi-même et ma famille. So you can see here, that's great. Yeah, lovely. The questions covered in this section are here. And then there's my answer. So I'm going to read the answer to you. Okay, and I'm going to show you afterwards what I really, really like. Moi, again, a lot of this, first part is about kind of John Stein's is made of character. 90% of it. Like there might be bits where maybe I didn't remember what I said earlier, but a lot of it is kind of based on this made up character. So, moi je m'appelle John Steins. Mon prénom s'écrit John. et mon nom de famille s'écrit S-T-Y-N-E-S. J'ai 18 ans et mon anniversaire est le 12 janvier. Je n'ai pas fait grand-chose à cause des examens blancs. J'aurais bien aimé sortir avec mes amis. L'année prochaine peut-être. Je suis allée dans un restaurant avec ma famille. Comme vous pouvez le voir, j'ai les yeux bleus et les cheveux marrons. Je ressemble beaucoup à mon père. Je suis assez grand. De nature, mes amis disent que je suis amicale et assez drôle. Mes parents disent que je suis paresseuse de temps en temps, mais je crois que c'est normal. Je me détends quand je peux. Je suis très occupée cette année. Go back, listen to that again. See if you can put in where I make liaison. That's going to be really, really telling for an examiner as to how much prep you've done for pronunciation if you put in the correct liaison. So, let's have a quick look through it again. Moi, je m'appelle, that's fine, mon nom de famille, c'est écrit. J'ai 18 ans here, et mon anniversaire, technically this is mon anniversaire. Je n'ai pas fait grand-chose à cause des examens blancs. And again, des examens blancs are mock exams. Mocks. J'aurais bien aimé. This construction here, j'aurais bien aimé, is past conditional. I would have quite liked. Again, you don't need to do that. So I'm hearing a student say j'aurais bien aimé. I'm going, okay, wow. Sortir avec mes amis. L'année prochaine peut-être. Peut-être meaning maybe. You don't have to say je suis allée, but you can. Je suis allée dans un restaurant avec ma famille. Comme vous pouvez le voir, stop being able to read, j'ai les yeux bleus et les cheveux marrons. Je ressemble beaucoup à mon père. Je suis assez grand. You don't have to do it there, but you can. With je suis, you don't have to make the liaison. De nature, mes amis disent que je suis amicale ou je suis amicale et assez drôle. Est assez drôle. Yeah, again here with est assez drôle as well we could, but we don't have to. Mes parents disent que je suis paresseuse de temps en temps, mais je crois que c'est normal. Je me détends quand je peux. Je suis très occupée cette année. Lovely. As an intro, that's really nice. It gives me something impressive. Past conditional. Tells me a lot about you. Tells me you've got friends, okay, that we can talk about. What you do with your friends. That brings me into hobbies. When you start planning answers, you should be thinking to yourself, I don't know if you've ever, kind of started planning an essay or planning a story to tell to someone and you go, God, I can't say that because they're going to ask me about something I don't want to talk about. That's exactly where your mind should be when you're prepping for the oral, okay? Oh, God, I don't want to talk about what I did last summer because, I don't know, it links into a topic that I don't want to talk about in the oral. So we're going to have to plan a contingency for that. Oh, I don't want to talk about what I did last weekend because, I don't know, there was a councillor or a politician that called to my door. So I'm not going to mention that. I'm going to make up something else because I don't want to talk about politics. Okay, and that's fine. I've mentioned parents, so I could be asked about that. I haven't mentioned siblings. Okay, but I did mention my dad and my parents. So maybe we could have thrown in a bit about siblings here to provide another link. Every answer you should be looking to kind of put in 2 to 3 hooks, 2 to 3 links to new topics, because it means that you can kind of have more or better control on what is happening. If the examiner doesn't have a hook provided by you, they're going to find their own, and oftentimes it won't be one you've thought of, so you've got more chance of being blindsided by the question. Let's look at then ma famille. So the questions here that are being addressed are parlez-moi de votre famille. Est-ce que vous vous entendez bien avec eux? Qui est l'aîné, le cadet? Or l'aîné, la cadette? Avez-vous plus de responsabilités? Do you have more responsibilities? À qui ressemblez-vous? Which is who do you look like? Est-ce que vos parents sont stricts? And est-ce qu'il y a beaucoup de règles chez vous? So what I tried to do here is there are more questions here than appear earlier even, but I've also tried to use a different form. Est-ce qu'il y a? So who do you look like? Are your parents strict? And are there many rules? Are there a lot of rules in your house? So again, I'm going to read the answer for you. If there's vocab you haven't seen, try and figure out what it means and see if you can make the liaison where you hear it. On est 5 chez moi. Il y a mon beau-père, ma mère, ma sœur, mon frère et moi. Nous avons aussi un petit chien Coco. Moi, je suis l'aînée de la famille et ma sœur est la cadette. Elle est la chouchoute de la famille. Très gâtée. J'ai plus de responsabilités vu que je suis plus âgée. Mais j'ai plus de liberté aussi, ce que je trouve juste. Mes parents sont stricts mais justes. Maintenant que j'ai 18 ans, il y a moins de règles à la maison. Des fois, je dois faire du babysitting pour ma sœur. Je dois ranger ma chambre et je fais la vaisselle. Ma mère Cathy a 45 ans, elle est sympa et travailleuse. Elle est femme d'affaires et elle travaille pour une grande entreprise. Je veux suivre ses traces et étudier le commerce. Mon beau-père Kiran a 46 ans et il est mécanicien. Il est plus strict que ma mère, mais il est drôle. Je m'entends bien avec eux. Comme je l'ai dit, je ressemble beaucoup à ma mère. Elle est grande et elle a les yeux bleus. La seule différence est qu'elle a les cheveux blonds. Je m'entends bien avec mon frère Franck et ma sœur Julia aussi, même si de temps en temps c'est la guerre entre mon frère et moi. Il me pique les vêtements. Lovely, really nice, and I've included some really nice things here, but some really nice things have been included in this answer. So, let's go through, we'll do it kind of paragraph by paragraph. Et moi, nous avons aussi un petit chien Coco. Moi, je suis l'aînée de la famille et ma sœur est la cadette. This here, sorry, that's a spelling mistake, should say est. Ma sœur est la cadette. Actually, that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see in the Leaving Cert, and I've fallen straight into it. Et is, et is and. Elle est la chouchoute de la famille. La chouchoute, sorry, that's a bit hard to see, is kind of like the pet. And that's the feminine version. For masculine, you'd say le chouchou. Le chouchou, la chouchoute. Très gâté. Gâté, meaning spoiled. J'ai plus de responsabilités vu que je suis plus âgée, mais j'ai plus de liberté aussi, ce que je trouve juste, which I find fair. And that's a relative pronoun. So we're upping our kind of language there. Mes parents sont stricts, mais juste, my parents are strict but fair. Now that I'm 18, maintenant que, it's almost a direct translation, but you wouldn't think to put it together that way. There are fewer rules at home. So moins de, that's in, if you look at the comparative, it's there. Moins de equals fewer. Des fois, je dois faire du babysitting pour ma soeur. And actually, when I talked about chores here, I put 3 because 3 is a good number. They're not going to ask too many more about that. You know what I mean? So I have to babysit my sister, I have to tidy my room, and I do the dishes. My mom, Kathy, is 45 and she's nice and hardworking. Elle est femme d'affaires, is businesswoman. Et elle travaille pour une grande entreprise. She works for kind of like a big firm. Sometimes that might be a multinational. Je veux suivre ses traces. That's a lovely expression. It means follow in her footsteps. Follow in her footsteps. Et étudier le commerce. Link there, university. Mon beau-père Kiran, so my stepdad is 46 and he's a mechanic. He's stricter than my mom, plus strict que. Again, that's a comparative. But he's funny. I get on well with them. Then I say, now this is where I kind of got a bit confused with myself because in the previous answer I said I look like my dad, but here I say, like I said, I look a lot like my mom. That's fine. Like obviously when you're talking about yourself, I was just putting together sample answers here. When you're talking about yourself, you're not going to mix up your own life. But do get someone to kind of check the continuity. She's tall, she's blue eyes. The only difference is that, la seule différence, the only difference is that she has blonde hair. So I get on well with my brother Frank and my sister Julia as well, even if, même si, sometimes de temps en temps, there's war between my brother and me. He nicks my clothes. And that's it. So if you can put together something like this on myself, my family, again, if you don't want to talk about your family, you can make it up, or you can have a quick word with your teacher just to say, listen, can you talk to my examiner, and just be like, maybe don't bring up this topic with this candidate. And that is fine. You are allowed to do that. Obviously, not to take advantage of that and be like, oh, I don't like skills, so I don't want to talk about it, or I don't like hobbies, so I don't want to talk about them. But if you have something that you're like, it's going to put me at an unfair disadvantage to be asked a question about this because it might bring up something I don't want to talk about, have a word with your teacher. They can have a word with the examiner, or have a word with the exam sec in your school to have a word with the examiner. That's fine. But if you can put together something like this, you are more than prepared for myself and my family. There's some really lovely stuff here for you to look over, and then you have all of the sentences that you need. Okay? Merci bien.